What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. This will be the week 10 recap, week 11 preview. As you can see, I am solo on camera this time. I had a couple of the other guys that were busy or out of town, but tonight it will be myself and then Dave from New Orleans via the phone, and then same with Addison. So there'll be three of us. But yeah, so we'll, same thing as usual. We're going to recap the games that we previewed last week, go through our winners and losers for the week, and then get into the Week 11 preview, which, to be honest, this week's slate is a little bit weaker, but there's 5 games that we're going to preview, and we'll see if we can make it as interesting as possible. So let's get right into the Week 10 recap, though. So we previewed 4 ranked versus ranked games last week, or last week, I should say. Georgia at Kentucky was the first one, and this ended up being pretty much total domination. Dave actually nailed this prediction pretty good. So I'll start with you, Dave. Did you want to just kind of give your quick recap of the game and what you took away from mainly Georgia? I think, considering that Kentucky's pretty much eliminated from the playoff now, right?
Right. So, one of the things, Nick, you and I disagreed on last week was you thought Kentucky's run defense was going to be able to stop them.
Yeah.
I thought that Georgia was going to get their run game going, and that's what happened. That's why they won the game. I think Georgia had easily over 300 yards of total rushing.
Yeah.
And for the first time this year, we saw them have very great success with their running attack. That's what made them successful last year with Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. And now it looks like they've got another good duo with Holyfield and Swift. So that's very promising for them going forward.
Yeah.
I think if they're going to be able to continue to run the ball that way, they could have a chance at challenging Bama.
Yeah, that was the next question, is that, I think the last couple games Georgia really has, and this was kind of the game that I wanted to get like a confirmation to see if their running game was in fact improved and back. And yeah, they, like you said, they physically dominated up front. I was very surprised that they were able to have the success on the ground they did. With Kentucky, it's pretty much what we thought. On offense, they just lack explosiveness. They just can't make plays down the field. And a guy that I feel like I always make fun of, Rick Neuheisel. Actually, I heard him on Dan Patrick's show this morning, and he made a really good point about explosive plays, that it's not – everyone just thinks it's about, like, explosive plays to make touchdowns or whatnot, but it's also about, like, flipping the field. So, like, if Kentucky is, deep in their own territory – and they can make an explosive play, but then they, maybe get shut down. Well, if they're around midfield or in plus territory, then they have a chance to maybe pin Georgia deep, or even perhaps go for it, give themselves a chance at success that way. So I think that he made a good point about that. But, I think we felt like Kentucky was, at least according to like the rankings and the polls, a little overrated. But Georgia was, yeah, they were definitely the story in this game, I thought, because they looked like a team that, if they play like that, I do think that they could give Bama a game. So, Addison, did you have any other thoughts about that game, or what did you think about Georgia specifically?
Well, I think we all knew that eventually Kentucky's fun little run was going to end. But,
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised, really, by the way the game went. Georgia came out, pretty much controlled it early. Kentucky couldn't get Benny Snell going, really. I mean, that's pretty much their offense.
Yeah.
They did get some garbage yards late through the air, made the game look closer than it really was. But yeah, Georgia, I mean, you guys mentioned already, they just dominated on the ground. Swift and Holyfield both went over 100. Fromm really didn't have to do anything in this game. So, yeah. This this is more like the Georgia we were expecting all year, So, I mean, that's really positive for them, playing well at this time of the year.
Yeah. So Tolman and I already we gave our opinions on it, but would you say that if Georgia plays like that, you would think that they have a shot at beating Bama in the SEC title game, right?
I would hope so, or else the playoffs are going to be really boring.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think, but we'll move on to the next game then. So we previewed West Virginia at Texas. This was a great game. This was one of the best games of the weekend. When you and Steele and I previewed this game, we all pretty much agreed that this was going to be very close. I feel like we leaned Texas simply because it was in Austin, and they actually have like a home field advantage now compared to like when they. I think this was pre like the stadium renovations and the additional seats that they added. Like that crowd was usually very lazy, I feel like, but they actually do have a pretty good home field advantage now. But this game, as far as West Virginia averaged, I think 7.7 yards per play. Texas had 7. They both were successful, or they both graded out above 53% as far as like how successful they were with their plays. So it was a very evenly played game. Dana Holgerson's got some balls going for it on 2 at the end there, but I guess the one I think surprising takeaway I had from this game was I was a little surprised that West Virginia was able to run the ball like they were on Texas. Like they were a little bit more physical up front on offense than I thought they were going to be. But I felt like the game definitely went how I thought it would go with somebody, pointed out on the last drive, essentially. Dave, what were your thoughts about that game? What's your takeaway? As far as I think we can all agree that Texas is eliminated from the playoff now, but I think West Virginia still has a decent shot. How do you feel about them moving forward?
I think West Virginia is still alive. I think they're probably the second best team in the Big 12. And so I'd go right now. I'd say Oklahoma 1, West Virginia number 2 in the Big 12. I thought the game was really interesting when I watched it. Even though the score was close the whole time, I felt like West Virginia looked better. They had more explosive plays. They ran the ball a lot better. And just what hurt them was that I think Texas got a couple scores or had a couple of extended drives because West Virginia committed like a lot of penalties.
Yeah, they had 14 penalties, I think, for over I think it was like maybe 130 penalty yards or something like that.
Yeah, they had a ton of penalty yards.
Yeah.
So when I was watching the game, I felt like West Virginia was the better team on the field. I think if you look at the box score, the yardages are similar and all that. But I thought Will Grier, he looked great. I think he's still in the Heisman discussion, and I like them right now to play Oklahoma. Well, maybe I guess it would be 2 weeks in a row, possibly.
Yeah, the last game of their season's in Morgantown, I believe.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was just looking at their schedule. It's really funny how that works out. And at this point, yeah, that looks like that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with David. I think they're both the 2 best teams in that conference right now, and I think I do think West Virginia is still alive because I think there could be definitely a scenario where they could sneak into that 4 seed. But Addison, how do you feel about West Virginia as far as do you think that on a neutral field right now, how many points do you think Oklahoma should be favored by?
Well, I expect West Virginia to be able to score with them for the most part,
Yeah.
So I don't know, Oklahoma, but by a touchdown.
Okay.
With that.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Right.
And then of course, they get the regular season game in Morgantown, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a game that we're gonna really be looking forward to. There's gonna be huge playoff implications with that game potentially. So it's gonna be weird though that they play back to back because they can almost cancel themselves out, like the whole conference could. So
Yeah, and there could be some other teams that are really hoping that happens.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so yeah, great game. We're gonna be interested to see West Virginia moving forward. The third game. Go ahead.
I also keep forgetting that every time I bet against Will Greer, I lose. So yeah, let's stop doing that.
Yeah, I may have.
With you, I had Texas -2. That was a bad beat, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that one a little later too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may have bet against Greer this next weekend already, but it's just purely because of the spot, and I took a terrible team, so I don't know. We'll see, but
TCU.
Yeah, I took TCU at 14.5. I feel like
I was thinking about that.
I think it's a good spot for them, and I think the pros already bet TCU down to like 13 or 13.5. So I don't know. We'll see. I could see Greer doing what he does again, though. TCU's been pretty bad. The thing is, Addison, the way I look at it is TCU stock is never going to be lower than it is right now. And
that's true.
They're pretty good against the pass, and they can run it decently well. And West Virginia, if they have like a decent flaw, they still have been pretty not so good against the run. So, and I think they're going to be partying a little bit in Morgantown. And that's a big win for that program, going down to Austin and beating them. So I just feel like it's mainly the spot. I don't think TCU is that good, but I just think it's the spot. So we'll move on to the third game, though. These next two games that we're going to talk about, there's not much to talk about. Penn State at Michigan. When we previewed this game last weekend, we all seemed to agree that we would have leaned Michigan. I said that I felt like it would be a no bet, but then when I dug into this game over the next 48 hours, this ended up being my most confident bet of the weekend, and that came to fruition. Michigan completely dominated Penn State. Penn State was only successful on 22% of their plays. They only averaged 3.96 yards per play. Michigan had 5.84. Michigan won the turnover battle by 3. This was just complete and utter like annihilation. Your guys I'll start with you, Addison, this time. Obviously I know like what your main takeaway from the game was, but how do you feel about Michigan moving forward? Are they by far and away the best team in the Big Ten? Could they compete with Bama and Clemson?
I think they can, just because I think they have the best defense in the country right now.
Yeah.
And they seem to be playing better every week, and they're also getting healthier. Rashawn Gary was back. Tariq Black was back.
Yeah.
So, getting guys back, and if they can score 42 with that defense, then that's kind of scary.
Yeah. Did we maybe I feel like we overrated Penn State a little bit, it seems like this year. Do you feel that way, or do you think is it a case of Michigan is just that good, or is Penn State possibly just pretty mediocre this year? What do you think about that?
I think it's a pretty good team they beat. They made Penn State look really bad. I don't think Penn State is really that bad.
Right.
So, I would call it a good win more than anything.
Okay. Dave, did you have any like different thoughts, or what was your take from that game?
I just think that Penn State's a very inconsistent team, and the inconsistent Penn State showed up.
Okay.
Penn State's not bad, but Michigan, in my eyes, they're the best team in the Big Ten by far, and inconsistent Penn State showed up, and that's why we saw a blowout.
Okay, yeah. There's not really much else to add. I feel like this game, Michigan's clearly in control of, I think they're in control of their own destiny. There could be interesting scenarios with like them and Notre Dame playing out, but I don't really want to get into that right now. We'll move into the last game that we previewed very quickly. Bama at LSU. This was just an absolute bloodbath. Bama averaged 7.29 yards per play to LSU's 3.27. LSU was only successful on 26% of their snaps. They only had 196 total yards. Bama had close to 600. Tolman, what was like the general takeaway from the LSU fan base? Is it just that Bama's that good, and LSU just going to be happy with the season that they're likely going to end up having, or were they actually disappointed with this turn or this actual result? I guess.
Well, so I'll give you the fan base's take. The fan base, and what's been said on the talk radio down here. I don't think the fan base expected to win against Bama.
Yeah.
Realistically, but I do think that this was the game and this was the year that the fan base thought that LSU would put up the most respectable fight. And watching the game, it seemed like LSU's defense pretty much did all they could in the first half, or at least most of the first half, to stop Bama's offense. But because LSU's offense couldn't do a single thing, defense got gassed, and LSU really never had much of a chance. So the fan base was happy about the defensive effort in the first half, and then Bama, as expected, pulled away.
Yeah. Addison, are you waiting to see? I feel like Saban going into this game kind of wanted to show that Bama still has the defense that they possibly usually have. Everyone just keeps talking about Tua and the offense, and rightfully so. But do you feel like, did you really take anything away from this game, or were some of your thoughts just confirmed about these two teams essentially?
Well, I thought LSU had a chance to keep it respectable going in.
Yeah.
And then really any chance of that happening, I thought went out the door when Alabama scored right before the half to make it 16-0.
Yeah, that was a very crucial moment in my opinion too. I feel like that took a lot of the air out of the stadium. It seemed like, and whenever you can get a touchdown right before the half like that, especially when I think LSU knew too. Like they just, it was going to be so hard for them to generate any kind of offense, and being down 2+ possessions at any point to Alabama was going to be tough for them. So
I thought that LSU, just because we hadn't seen Alabama their defense against a team as physical as LSU yet this year. So I thought LSU had a good chance to control the ball a little bit and keep it closer, but they couldn't do anything. And, yeah. And they just Alabama's offense had the ball too much, and it was kind of death by 1,000 cuts. It was just too many plays that Alabama's offense ran.
Yeah,
it seems like the last several years, LSU can't do anything offensively against Bama. It just seems to be
so
theme in this series right now.
Apparently the last Bama has held LSU scoreless in the last 10 quarters that they've played in Baton Rouge. So I feel like LSU just it's been a pretty fun story considering that I think their expectations were pretty low this year, but I think that that's a tough spot. Bama's right now being considered one of the best teams of all time, and we'll see if that plays out. But but LSU I think is going to end up having a pretty solid year. But I think this game pretty much showed that they just don't have enough on offense. Like Dave and I have been saying that we've all been saying that on this pod for since the beginning of the year, that LSU just doesn't have the playmakers that they usually do, around Joey Burrow. They just haven't been as efficient, and everyone thinks this year that LSU's still been a decent running team. They've actually been average to below average with that also. Their defense had been that good. They had been opportunistic, but they just ran into what is, the buzzsaw right now. So, those were the 4 games that we previewed. And let's move on to the winners and losers segment before we go to our Week 11 preview. Do you guys have your winners and losers ready, or do you need me to go first?
I'm ready.
All right, Dave, we'll start with you then, and then if Addison's ready, we'll go to him next. So go ahead.
All right, so my big winner of the week was Michigan. Just the way basically stopped Penn State.
Yeah.
The way I think they just put the conversation to bed about who's the best team in the Big Ten right now. And I think they solidified themselves as a real college football playoff contender with that win.
Okay. And then do you go ahead with your loser if you want?
My loser is the Pac-12 South Conference.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 or 4 teams with 3 losses.
Oh yeah,
I don't know how it's going to be decided who's going to win that division if there's a logjam like that.
Yeah, so I sent a few of the other guys this tweet that it showed like a scenario where all 6 teams would be tied, and
yeah.
I don't have any idea how that would be decided. I don't know. It's really just I kind of like watching their games because it's just like a comedy of errors. Like there's just so much like I don't know what the right word is, like shenanigans going on with those games. But yeah, that division is just it is a mess, and that conference overall just again they are just really behind these other conferences right now as far as being able to put out like like an elite playoff contender. But yeah, so those are some good winners and losers for sure. Addison, if you want to go ahead with yours, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more thing on that Pac-12 thing.
Yeah.
So the tiebreaker would usually be like the highest ranked team in the playoff rankings, right? But no one would be ranked.
Yeah, I don't know then.
Were they all like? You could have like a Friday Night Lights like type of thing.
Coin flip.
Yeah.
Like everyone could roll. Like, you could have all 6 of them there, and they all roll a die.
that would be that. You know what? Honestly, if they put that on TV, I would 100% watch that.
Oh, I'd gamble on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, but Addison, go ahead if you got winners and losers.
Yeah, all right. I'll start with my loser. I just remember looking at this on Saturday and thinking that I had to go with this for sure. Minnesota.
Yeah.
Because they gave up 55 points to Illinois. and they gave up 430 on the ground.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Fighting Illini.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The final score was actually 55-31. They were getting their asses beat the whole game. I do want to say that Illinois got a pretty good running back though. Reggie Corbin. He had 213 yards on 13 carries, and I've seen he's been having a pretty good year this year. Just no one's really ever heard of him because he plays for Illinois though.
Yeah, that is actually a team that I'm leaning this week. They are getting 18 points at Nebraska, and Illinois is very, very atrocious on defense. And I actually am looking to see what the total is going to be. If it's in the 60s, I think I'm going to automatically bet the over because, as you alluded to, I think Illinois is going to be able to run the ball on them, and they're not going to stop Nebraska. So if they can at least stay in the game to where they can continue to have the opportunity to run the ball, I think that game could get into the 70s easily. So I'm interested to see what the total is.
I think that makes a lot of sense too. So that's one I'm curious to see as well.
But yeah, so go ahead with your winner then, or winners, whichever.
Yeah, I've been trying to remember if I had a winner.
I can go if you.
I'll go with West Virginia though.
Okay.
They cleared. Obviously, their schedule's backloaded this year. Everyone was saying, wait till November or whatever. But they just they cleared one of their big hurdles to get to the Big 12 championship. Now they've got a couple games they should win, and then they've got Oklahoma at the end of the year, of course. But they're a team that I wasn't thinking about as a national contender all year because they hadn't really beaten anyone.
Yeah.
But I mean they really they at least control their own destiny kind of to get to the playoffs. So
Addison, I actually think of them. I think of them as a potential national contender because the way that I'm thinking about it now is anyone's a national contender if you think they would have a chance against Bama. And I actually think it's the teams like the Big 12 teams like the Oklahomas and the West Virginias that aren't afraid of like excessive scoring and getting the shootouts that might be able to handle something like that.
Yeah, it's a weird year in college football. Like, I feel like it's a lot different than last year. Like, a lot more offensive. Last year in the playoff, you had Hurts and Kelly Bryant as the quarterbacks. Like, this year, the playoff is going to look totally different. For one, those two teams replaced their quarterbacks and are a ton more offensive now. And it's just Ohio State's the same way. I don't really expect us to be there, but I think that we always talk about you got to be able to like win in the trenches, like to actually be a championship team. But this year, I feel like you've got to be able to score too. So, yeah, that's a good point on teams that can score. Like we could see games like that in the playoff.
Yeah, no, I think those are good points. I can't disagree with that. I think if you're in the playoff this year, look, the road is going clearly. It looks right now like it's going to go through, Alabama and Clemson most likely, and Clemson's starting to find their footing with their offense, and their defense obviously is very good. Bama's very good. So I agree, though. I think it's a good point that West Virginia, it's interesting. I don't think obviously Bama's, I think definitely the best team, and then I think we can agree that Clemson is, probably the second best team. But after that, there's a bunch of teams from like 3 to 12, 3 to 15 that I don't think they're too much like different from each other. They just all have like, either one or multiple flaws that have them quite far behind those, the top two teams. But West Virginia is certainly a team that, as Tolman said, they have the quarterback, they have the offense, the defense. Even though they haven't been so great against the run, they haven't been as bad. Like I think they could have a shot. That's a team that would be fun to see them as an underdog in the playoff and see what they can do. So that's a good segue though for your winner, Addison, because I have Dana Holgerson as one of my winners. I love the 2-point conversion call. I just love I don't know if you guys saw the little clip where he says to Greer, hey, do you want to go win the game? Then let's go win the game. Like just straight up, nothing but big balls and just wants to go for the win. So I respect that. I've always liked him, and he's definitely one of my winners. And I guess West Virginia overall. And then my losers for the week, it's going to be Nebraska special teams. For you viewers that happened to catch the Ohio State-Nebraska game, there were a couple hilarious Nebraska special teams gaffes, basically. After Nebraska scored on their opening drive, they went up 7-0, and they tried to surprise Ohio State with an onside kick. The kicker essentially kicked it backwards. The ball went it basically got stuck in place and went about a yard backwards. He fell over trying to do this. And then I believe they also had, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, didn't we block a punt of theirs as well, and we got a safety off of that?
Yeah, we blocked punt for safety.
Yeah, so Nebraska special.
That kickoff was the worst kick I've ever seen.
Yeah, so
I sent Addison like the Charlie Brown meme of like the football getting like pulled up.
Yeah. So Nebraska special teams, huge loser. A little side loser as well. In that game, Jordan Fuller, Ohio State safety, got thrown out for targeting. It is one of that rule, just the refs overall. I understand that what the letter of the law is, but this rule, I guess it's not so much the refs, but it's, I guess like the NCAA and like whoever is on this rules committee, because this rule has to be changed. Too many kids are getting thrown out for trying to do the right thing. Fuller tried to hit this tight end that was on a seam route, essentially tried to hit him in the target zone. He double clutched. He went down to the ground as Fuller was already going down. Fuller ends up hitting him in the head, and he gets thrown out for targeting. So there has to be some kind of like subjectiveness to this where the refs can, decide if there's intent or not. I don't know if they need to go to, like Corey from Denver suggested, which I've seen this suggested a couple times, like the college basketball rule where you have like flagrant 1, flagrant 2 type of thing. But, and this topic could be talked about endlessly. We've talked about this off camera amongst ourselves, but I guess, like, yeah, I'm going to say, like, the NCAA is a loser as far as this goes, though. This rule must be changed because it is going to possibly cost some teams some games when they lose some players to this. And it probably already has. So,
yeah, Nick, common sense says change it, but I think it boils down to, like, a legal issue for the NCAA. So if they change it, they set a precedent that they probably don't want to get themselves into.
Yeah, possibly. And it's a shame just because then, like, I just think that these kids on defense, I don't know what they're supposed to do in some of these spots. So, but yes.
The reason why they have that rule is because they don't want the kids on defense to be around these plays at all.
Right.
That's the reason why they have it. It's to deter even, like, considering, like, going down at the same time as your offensive opponent is going down.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah,
Nick, one more thing on that.
Go ahead.
The dumbest thing I thought about that play where he got ejected is it looked like he actually tried to not use his head.
Oh, 100%.
Hit the guy.
Yeah, he used his shoulder.
So he used the shoulder, but still he hit him too high, so it was, they called it targeting.
Yeah.
But like, the Nebraska guy was going down too, so it was really hard for him to not hit him high, and it was just unfortunate. I think it's stupid that you get ejected for that.
Yeah, we've talked about that where, like, if you want to eject him for, like, the rest of the series or something like that, or for the next series or whatever, but, like, sending these kids out for the rest of the game to where it affects them possibly for the next game, like with Devin White with LSU. Now, I don't think that would have mattered, but still, they're missing their best player for a missed call by a different referee crew in the game before that. Like, I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. So, but yeah, we'll move on from that. And, fellas, let's get into the Week 11 preview. So, usually we pretty much do, like, almost only, like, ranked versus ranked opponents. But this week there's only 2 of those games. So I decided to add a couple, like, notable games. 4 of these games have double-digit lines. So we'll have to kind of dig into it and see, how we can make this interesting. But first game, though, is one that has a line that's a little bit smaller. It's a game that us 3 as Ohio State fans actually care about. Ohio State is at Michigan State this weekend at noon. The line right now, I believe, is currently OSU minus 3.5. That has moved down from, I believe it opened at like 5.5. So it seems like there's been some movement in favor of Sparty. I haven't seen a weather report yet, so I don't want to get into that too much. But overall,
cold, but no precipitation on the horizon.
Okay, so Michigan State would automatically win if there was rain, so that's a good thing for us fellas. Dave, I guess I'll start with you. What are your thoughts about this game?
I hate talking about this game because it's always ugly or usually ugly, especially in East Lansing. I don't like the way Ohio State's playing right now, so I'm actually feeling pretty negative about Ohio State right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be a close, ugly 19-17 kind of game in East Lansing, and maybe Ohio State will win, but I don't think we'll learn anything. I don't think we'll learn anything more about either of these 2 teams in the sloppy game.
Okay, so you're clearly leaning Michigan State. It sounds like then.
Yeah.
As far as like spread, and you're saying like they have a chance to win essentially. Yeah.
I'm not gonna bet it. I'm not gonna bet it just because I don't like betting against Ohio State personally.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
It's like I'm not looking forward to watching this game at all.
Okay. Yeah. No. I guess I'll just go real quick and then I'll let Addison kind of clean up for us. I feel the same way as you as essentially an OSU fan. I try to be pretty realistic and I guess like yeah, I guess just like realistic when I evaluate this team. I've been saying since before the Purdue game that I felt like we possibly weren't the best team in the Big Ten and we're possibly a little bit fraudulent. And we clearly saw against Purdue. We did not play well against Minnesota. There was actually a couple points in that game that I thought that Minnesota could actually pull off the upset, which is really embarrassing now that I've seen Minnesota play a few more games since then. But overall, this game, as you said, Dave, I never look forward to this game, especially since, D'Antonio's been there. I just feel like he always has Michigan State up for this game. They have 28 players from Ohio on their roster, and they always seem to have about like a third of their roster from Ohio. So this is a huge game for a lot of the kids that feel like they were overlooked by Ohio State. And this is as far as like from a betting perspective, it's weird because I feel like OSU does some things that Michigan State does not defend well. Like Michigan State's been not so great against the pass this year. Ohio State's obviously been a pretty damn good passing team, but Michigan State has been a top 3 team in the country as far as stopping the run, which when Ohio State's been shown to be put in a situation like almost every other team in the history of football where they're one-dimensional, that they tend to struggle. And I guess my main curiosity in this game is I want to see if OSU can carry over their rushing success from Nebraska to this game. If they can run the ball on Sparty, even close to what they did against Nebraska, and that's not saying a whole lot.
Michigan State's got the #1 rush defense in college football.
Right, yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If OSU can run on them, then I might feel a little more comfortable about OSU competing with Michigan. But I have a feeling that Ohio State is going to struggle again to run the ball this weekend, and it's going to be put on Haskins' shoulders. The only thing that gives me a little hope as far as OSU pulling out the win on the field is that Michigan State has been pretty terrible on offense this year. They have really struggled to run the football. They've had to try to come up with creative ways to do it, and they can't just line up and pound it like D'Antonio wants to. They've been decent passing the ball, but overall, it hasn't been great. The offense has been really abysmal. But this is a tough spot for Ohio State, and I don't like this spot for them. I think because I think Michigan State can win this game, I would lean Michigan State the points if I'm looking at it just from a betting perspective. So, Addison, what are your thoughts about the game?
Well, I definitely would have leaned Michigan State at the 5.5.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I see this being like a field goal game, at most. Kind of throw out last year's game when we dominated them.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be much more like the 6 games before that when the series was 3-3.
Yeah.
And in 4 of those games, neither team scored 20 points, and the games were decided by 3 points or less. So,
yeah,
ugly, low-scoring game is very possible in this. That's the kind of game Michigan State likes to play. They don't do anything flashy. They're really good defensively. You mentioned the problems they've had running the ball this year. But interestingly, this past weekend against Maryland, they had easily their best rushing game of the year. They ran for 269 yards against the Terps. So that'll be interesting if they can keep that going this week.
Mm-hmm.
LJ Scott has been out the last few weeks, so we don't know if he's going to play. I would guess he will. I don't have any inside info there. But
right.
if he's questionable, I feel like this is a game that he's going to want to play in.
Yeah, I agree.
His last game against Ohio State as an Ohio kid. So
right.
And you made a good point about our running game too. That was the biggest thing I wanted to see this past weekend against Nebraska is Ohio State get their rushing attack back. And we finally were able to show that. It seemed like it had been, since like the first couple games that we've really been able to run the ball effectively.
Oh, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ohio State, we're not used to seeing that from our team. So the only thing it was against Nebraska. So we need to keep it going this week. And if we're going to have like any chance against Michigan, we have to be able to win in the trenches like that. So, this is a game that's always, most of the time, it's usually, ugly, low scoring, and it's, very physical game. And that's kind of what I expect.
Okay, yeah. I think we're all on the same page. I think we're, expecting an ugly game, somewhat nervous about it. Addison, that's the main thing I'm looking for. If we get completely shut down in the run game against Michigan State, then I have a bad feeling about the game 2 weeks from that point. So, but if they show some life again, and if they come out and run the ball and they look really good in this game, and they pretty much dominate it from the beginning to the end, then there might be hope for this team. Now, that's as far as I think the Big Ten goes, but I as far as us being fans and our national title aspirations, I'm not really expecting much from this team this year anymore. So I'm kind of looking at it as just kind of going to enjoy each game and hope for the best, essentially, but expect the worst. So we'll move on to the next game. The only reason that I have this game, guys, on the docket is because it is technically a ranked versus ranked opponent, but Mississippi State is at Alabama this weekend. Alabama is giving 26 points, and I guess I'll go first real quick. I have a really hard time seeing how Mississippi State even stays competitive in this game, even in the first half. I think that Bama is going to sell out to essentially, I would imagine Saban forcing Nick Fitzgerald to make plays through the air. And the last 2 weeks, he actually hasn't been that bad for once. He's actually looked okay, but this is a completely different animal. Mississippi State has played pretty well on D this year. Their front seven's pretty nasty, but I just don't see how they keep up with Bama in this game. Addison, I guess I'll start with you. Is there any way in hell that Mississippi State shocks the world and this game is competitive in the fourth quarter, or do you think this is just another ass beating and Bama's up by 4 touchdowns in the first half?
The latter. I don't see Mississippi State having a chance to even keep it close, really.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're going to make Fitzgerald pass, and that's not going to work for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And if I had to pick anything, really, the 26 points, I'd probably take Bama, honestly. I don't like laying a lot of points. I mean, it's not a game that I would bet, probably.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I would lean on the Bama side, really.
Yeah, no, I would lean Bama too, just because I don't trust Fitzgerald to keep the game close. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, they're not gonna score a lot of points, I don't think.
No, I'm having a hard time figuring out how they score like even 14. I don't know I think if they get to 14, they'd be pretty fortunate, to be honest. It would have to come like in garbage time, essentially. But Dave, do you have any different thoughts about it? Do you think Mississippi State actually has any chance, or are they going to get absolutely annihilated?
No, because I think you saw that even with a pretty good defensive effort, which is something that Mississippi State can give. I actually think they have the top pass defense in college football.
Right.
Even with a good defensive effort, you're going to hold Alabama at the lowest of 28 points. I don't think that Mississippi State has a chance to score either. So
okay.
I would take Bama to cover.
Okay, yeah. So, like I said, that game's on there because it's ranked versus ranked. I knew there wasn't going to be a lot to talk about, and I don't think there's going to be much to take away from this game after Bama smokes them. So, let's move on to the next game. This is going to be, I believe they call it Bedlam. It's going to be Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. This is another I actually was a little bit surprised at this line. Oklahoma's giving 18 right now, and Oklahoma State. Dave, you alluded to the fact that Penn State's been pretty inconsistent this year. Oklahoma State's they've been the definition of that. There's been times where they've looked like a Big 12 contender, and then there's been other games where they have looked like a bottom of the barrel Big 12 team. So, as far as I guess Dano, I'll hand it to you first. Do you think, first of all, I guess, does Oklahoma State have a chance to pull off the upset, or do you think that they can keep it within the number? What are you looking for out of this game?
I don't see Oklahoma State having a chance to pull off the upset. I really don't like their inconsistency. I do not like the way that they played against Baylor, against what I thought was an inferior Baylor team last week. I think there was actually some strange coaching calls that possibly blew the game for Oklahoma State last week. And I think that Oklahoma's offense is just overall too explosive. So I lean towards taking Oklahoma to cover, but I probably won't bet it.
Okay. Addison, your thoughts on that game?
I don't know, because Oklahoma State's a weird team this year. I mean, you're right. It seems like you don't know what you're going to expect out of them. They're not very good on the road. So, and this game is in Norman. Rivalry game, I would probably, if anything, lean Oklahoma State. But I just think their inconsistency scares me enough to not take them.
Yeah, I think, this is a tough call as far as like from a betting perspective. I mean, both of your guys' points and your sides, like, they just make sense to me. I think, Addison, I think I would lean with you if I had to. There's no way in hell I'm gonna bet this spread. I think I would lean.
I don't want to. Like I definitely favor Oklahoma to get close to covering, but
Right.
I don't want to take the spread in a rivalry game.
Right. And I think some things that Oklahoma State does well, like their offense has been pretty efficient as far as, Gundy's teams have been able to move the ball in his tenure. Oklahoma State actually does get to the quarterback. I think they are. At one point, they were ranked first in the country as far as total sacks, and I think as far as like advanced metrics like sack rate, they're like top 25 or something like that. Surprisingly, when I was looking at OU and their metrics, I was actually a little surprised with all the injuries they've had at tailback that OU's ranked like top 5 in like rushing efficiency and overall just rushing period. They haven't been all just Kyler Murray, and Oklahoma State's been pretty bad against the run. So there's definitely potential for OU to get out ahead early and I think blow the doors off this thing. But OU has shown that they are quite vulnerable still on defense. Like I think they're going to give up some points, and that's why I think Oklahoma State can keep it within that number. But there's no way in hell I would touch this line just because there's, like you said, Dave, there's definitely potential for OU to win this game by like 40 points. So yeah, no chance for Oklahoma State according to this podcast. We will move on to the next game. Possibly, we'll see what you guys think. I could see this being kind of like a sneaky game, but I don't think so. Auburn is at Georgia. Georgia is giving, I believe it's either 14 or 14.5 right now. Auburn, they should have lost last weekend, but somehow, miraculously, they came back in the last 6 minutes, I think down 14 or down 10 to win against Texas A&M. We obviously already recapped Georgia's big win against Kentucky, but Addison, I guess I'll start with you. What are your thoughts about this game? Do you think, obviously, you're lean against the number, and then do you think Auburn has a chance to shock, I guess, the nation and pull off the win on the field?
Well, as far as the number goes, I would definitely lean Auburn, and this one might be one I end up actually taking Auburn. I think I don't think they have a chance really to win the game, but I think they'll be competitive. After the bad loss to Tennessee they had a few weeks ago, since then they beat Ole Miss and then got a pretty good win this past weekend against A&M. So
Yeah.
I think they're playing better, than they were, because they've been pretty disappointing so far this year. But if they're playing a little better, I'll definitely take the 2 touchdowns.
Okay. Dave, your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I don't have a different take. I'd lean Auburn on the number. I think this seems to me like a kind of a 10-point victory for Georgia. That's just because Auburn's playing a little bit better, but I think that Georgia, with the running attack going, touchdown and field goal.
Okay, yeah, I probably the same. I don't think I'm going to bet this. I think I would lean the same way. I think Auburn has shown a little bit of improvement. The one thing that would concern me backing Auburn is they still seem to be really struggling to run the football, and that's like, Gus's bread and butter as far as what his offense is predicated on. And the fact that Georgia has found their physicality, their run game. But Auburn's been they've been quite good on defense this year, against the run and against the pass. I think that will be enough, I believe, to keep it within the number, but it's a little scary to me. I could see Georgia having their way in this game, but I think Auburn has shown a little bit of improvement, so I think I would lean that way, but I don't think they have a real good shot at in the fourth quarter of winning this game or anything. So we'll move on to the last game on the slate. It's going to be the second ranked versus ranked game this week, and of essentially 2 of those types of matchups. Clemson is at Boston College. I believe that is the ABC primetime game at 8. Clemson's giving 18 at this point. And Dave, I will start with you. Again, same questions. Do you think, what's your lean against the number? Does BC have any real shot, in your opinion, of pulling off the upset on the field?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how much we know about BC this year. I haven't watched too many snaps of their games. We know that they have a pretty good tailback in A.J. Dillon that's been health-wise kind of in and out. I think he is healthy now. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
I was looking at betting this game. I think some of the advanced computer things like BC. So, but I think I would personally lean Clemson on the number. I think with the way that their offense is playing, to couple with a top 5 defense, I think it's too much for BC. But it'll be fun. I can't remember the last time that game day was in Boston.
Yeah, Chestnut Hill is always kind of like a weird, like, tough place to play. I feel like kind of like an underrated road venue. But Addison, I'll go to you, and then Addison, I think you know my take, and I think Dave, you saw my bet. Like I'll when it gets to me, I'll explain why I think Clemson's going to murder this team. But Addison, go ahead. What would you lean against the number? Do you have the opinion that BC can win this game outright?
No, not at all.
Okay.
So Clemson right now, usually I would be tempted to take the 18 points, but
right.
Clemson's just been playing so ridiculous right now that I wouldn't bet against them. So I don't know if I'm going to take them yet, but yeah, definitely leaning Clemson. And I just feel like, offensively and defensively, like in terms of like both sides of the ball, I think Clemson is, playing like the best out of anyone.
Oh,
I'm not saying they're better. I'm not saying they're better than Bama.
Right.
Balance on both sides of the ball. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I did take Clemson. I was able to get it at 17. Actually, I don't think that matters too much. This line I think is, I think this is personally good up to maybe even past 21. BC this year. So Dave, I actually have, for some reason, seen some BC games. I think it's because I bet some of them earlier in the year. They, under Adazio, like the last, I'd say like half decade, like 5 years or so, they've been very, very good on defense. That's not the case this year. They've been their pass defense has actually been pretty good. I think it's like top 25 in the nation, but surprisingly their run defense has been pretty much like middle of the pack, maybe even below average.
They have a pretty good pass rush. I think they have a pretty good pass
They
rush.
do, yeah. They have a very good defensive end that will be playing on Sundays. I don't remember his name, but the pass rush is pretty good. I was looking at some of the advanced metrics, like their stuff rate, like essentially stops that are at the line of scrimmage or behind the line. I think they're actually closer to like 90th to 100th in the nation, if I remember correctly. They also offensively, you think of them as being like a very good run team, with AJ Dillon in, but I think even when he's been healthy, they're definitely a different rushing offense when he's in, I think, but they've been not very good running the ball. Their passing game, they get actually a fair amount of explosive plays, but that is basically predicated on like play action working. So what I see happening is I think Clemson's D line and their front seven are going to absolutely shut down BC's run game. It's going to render them effectively, I think, helpless on offense. And I think that I think Clemson's going to be able to run the ball in this game. I think I think their running backs are going to have a big day. I think there might not be as much success through the air with Lawrence this time, but the main thing is it's the same thing with the Mississippi State Alabama game. I'm having a hard time figuring out how Boston College is going to move the football and score points. And I think that Clemson is they're going to be hard pressed to not score at least 28. I'm struggling to figure out how BC gets to 10 to 14. So I bet Clemson. I like them a lot in this game. I think if they show up ready to play, which they usually do under Dabo, I think this is going to be possibly a massacre. I'd be surprised if BC kept this competitive. So I think the last.
So Nick, we don't think it's going to happen.
Right.
But if BC somehow did win this game, then they would control their own destiny in the division.
Yeah, which is absolutely insane because it's funny when Dave mentioned before the Pac-12 South, the ACC Coastal is like an absolute joke. Also,
BC Pitt for ACC championship game.
Yeah, so Corey from Denver sent like a tweet today that basically said that Pitt is first in the ACC Coastal right now, but they have a negative scoring margin. So, I mean, like these teams in the Coastal are pretty damn average. Like they are all. I mean, Addison, what do we call it? It's the ACC Wheel of Destiny, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and there are a lot of potentially funny conference championship games. Like, for example, in the Big Ten, the West is a mess, and Northwestern could lose this weekend, be 5-5, and still control their own destiny.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny, like you said, like a lot of divisions that are really up for grabs amongst a bunch of basically average football teams, and it's going to be interesting to see moving forward. If there is any kind of chaos that shakes out. But, like we said, this slate is going to be, hopefully it surprises us. And there's, I feel like when this kind of slate comes up, there's like something that happens that nobody's expecting. So, there could be something wild that happens. But I think the next couple weeks, Dave and I were talking about this. It's going to be tough to find a lot of great games until we get into like, essentially rivalry week, and then we get into the conference championships, of course. But did you guys have any closing thoughts? Like usually the last segment I leave for, if you guys have any bets that you've made. If you haven't, then no big deal. For you viewers, those will be listed as always later in the week, basically under the comment section. But did you guys have any final thoughts or any bets you wanted to throw out?
So, final thought is to make the case that really the loser of the week was college football overall, because I think there's just
I think it's just Bama's year, and they're just going to kind of run away with it, which could make things somewhat boring for the rest of the year. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if y'all want to talk about that at all. But
Well, here, I'll throw this real quick at you guys, since we're at like about an hour, so it's, I think it's, it's been pretty good here. But Neuheisel, he also made a point that I was like, you know what, I never thought about it this way, but he was talking about playoff expansion. I still am one that thinks it should stay at 4. I've always said that if it were to expand, I would hope that it would only be 6 with like the first 2 seeds getting like a bye essentially. But I feel like with how it's pretty much always going to be about the money, that it's going to expand at some point. But he did bring up a point that I want to see what you guys thought about this. He said that he thinks that there should be expansion to maybe like 8 teams because he thinks it'll help open up recruiting a little bit. Like, he thinks right now because Bama and Clemson and like OSU are essentially like, and mainly we're talking like mainly like Bama and Clemson. He thinks that like because those 2 teams are like the ones that, kids like right now in high school are like, well, if I want to win a national title, then I have to go to those 2 schools. But he feels like if it was open up to 8 teams, that maybe kids would be like, well, I can go play elsewhere and then maybe compete on that kind of stage and not have to worry about only choosing between like Bama, Clemson, Georgia, and OSU essentially. Dave, I'll start with you real quick. Is that like a valid thought from him, or what do you think about that?
I heard that this morning, and that was the first time that I agreed with the point about expanding the team to 8.
Yeah,
I'm very much in favor of a top 4, but I had actually never heard that point before. I thought it was brilliant, and for the first time, I was like, okay, that would be a scenario where I would be down with eight teams in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, and that is like the one time where I was like, yeah, that like makes sense. Like maybe I would be on board with that. Like I said, I still think I'd be mainly for just the 4 teams, just because I think then Addison, I'll hand it to you. I think you're with me on this. Like we've talked about how what makes college football different from the NFL is that the regular season just matters so much more. What do you think about that comment? And like, does that sway your opinion on that at all? Like expansion overall?
It's an interesting point that I'd never really thought of or heard of before.
Yeah.
I think it's valid, but I still want to keep it at 4. I just think if you go to what you said about 6, I think you can do that without watering down the regular season really too much.
Yeah.
But I think if you go past that, you start to get into that territory where some of the games that are like really exciting that make the college football regular season so great lose a lot of their value. So it would definitely change the game quite a bit. Okay.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. I think eventually it's going to expand to the point where I don't want it to, but I don't want it to end up to where like you just said, where like for example, Michigan Notre Dame this year obviously had huge playoff implications, it looks like, and if it were at 8, then I don't think that like a team that loses, like I don't think Michigan after they lose that game feels like the pressure to have to run off like the rest of the schedule. You know what I mean? Like I feel like if they lose that game, they're just like, well, it doesn't matter because there's 8 and we can win the Big Ten with 2 losses and probably still get in.
Yeah, that's true. Like if they lose a game right now, they'd still be in the top 8 probably. So
yeah. So yeah, all right. So I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, you guys, for as far as like the betting perspective and the bets from the pod smashed it last weekend. I think overall we were I think Corey from Denver was like 7-1. Steele was like 4-0. Addison and I both had winning weeks. I think Dave, you said maybe not one of your better weeks, but overall this year you seem to be killing it. So
yeah, that week. I
yeah.
like 5 bad beats
games last week.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we did well. It seems like we're on the upswing at the right time of the year, and so if you guys,
Corey should have listened to us on Ohio State and taken Nebraska.
well, I was unfortunately on OSU after all at the end of the day, but I feel like early in the week I was heavy on Nebraska, and then I just felt like it was a spot for Ohio State, which clearly was not. Well, the thing too is like if OSU doesn't turn it over 3 times in that game, then I think they actually have a good shot at covering that game because they almost had a shot to backdoor it at the end, but they are not playing good football right now. So, but yeah, if you guys have any, for you viewers, if you have any, thoughts or comments of your own or whatever, obviously, send them our way under the video and look for the bets later in the week and look forward to the podcast next week.